You said statements either true or false. I gave you a statement, and you said it doesn't apply.
Not truth apt.
It's not.
So only truth apt statements would be either true or false.
So is it true that I'm talking to you? Is it true that it's a true statement? I'm talking to you. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. Is it true that babies exist?
Well, I mean, how
babies
far you
exist.
go down the skeptical?
Babies exist. Babies exist. Is it true, or is it not the case that it's true?
I mean, if you want to go down if you want to be very strict about it, I would be skeptical about it.
Okay, we're done talking.
This is Apologetics Live. To answer your questions, your host from Striving for Eternity Ministries, Andrew Rappaport.
We are live, Apologetics Live, here to answer your most challenging questions about God and the Bible. We can answer any question that you have about God and the Bible. If you doubt that, just go to apologeticslive.com any Thursday night that we're doing a show that's not a formal debate, that is, and you could ask us your most difficult questions. I have an answer for you. Just remember, I don't know is a perfectly good answer. Let me bring my co-host here, Drew, in.
Howdy.
Drew, well, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. I noticed something, by the way. About a year ago, you were, talking to Anthony and I about what we're doing for the hair growth, and it looks like something's going there. Did you just stop shaving, or is it working?
It looks like it's growing in the wrong way, right? In the wrong direction. So it's not so much growing up as much as it is growing down.
Okay. Well, babies do exist. That was hard for that atheist, but I will not be hard, I think, for our atheist tonight to admit that babies exist. I think that will be fine. Let me bring Bill in. And for folks who don't know, last week we did a debate where we aired the debate that Bill and I had at the Legacy Classical Christian Academy. Bill, I'll say, and Drew, you could verify this with what your thoughts were, but a lot of people really enjoyed the debate we had, the way you conducted yourself, and so there were a lot of kudos given to you. So just wanted to let you know that. So, Bill, can you hear us? Okay.
Oh yeah.
Okay. So why don't you introduce yourself? Let folks know. A little bit about yourself if they don't remember from last week, if they didn't watch it.
Yeah, I became an atheist about 20 years ago. I like to play pickleball. I like to do art. And I started 6 years ago with James Walker, the Atheist Christian Book Club. And we just came up with one with Tim McGrew out of Western Michigan University, where it's on now, talking about his wife, Lydia, wrote a book about is Christianity, the truth of Christianity, something to that effect. So, yeah, really enjoyed the debate with you, Andrew, and, had a fantastic time.
Yeah, and so for folks to know, you have a book club where you review an atheist book as a group and have discussion. You review a Christian book, have discussion. You've been doing this for how long have you been doing that?
Oh, gosh, about 6 years now. Yeah.
Okay. I thought it was longer. Okay, good. So 6 years, and you guys choose another different book from each side, have the discussion, others can join. So it was kind of neat. I got to see some of those. Good discussions, good. I think the people that watched our debate appreciated the way that we treated each other, the way that we there wasn't the name calling and beating each other up type of thing.
Well, so, James emphasizes that respectful. I'm more, I like more of a, tension and back and forth. So,
Well, from what I noticed just watching is it seemed like the discussion was a lot of fun when you were there. It seemed, and that's, because we've seen debates that get really heated and you never know what's going to happen next. You're waiting for someone to storm off the stage. And we want discussions to be fun. We want them to be engaging because I think that's the best way that the audience learns.
Right.
Yeah. So what we're going to do tonight, folks, if you're listening on podcast, just so you know, and Bill, do you know how to mute yourself? There's a little mute at the
Yeah,
bottom.
I think so. Yeah.
So just mute yourself when you're not speaking, because we're getting an echo from you.
Okay.
I don't know if that's something I could fix for guests. Yeah, because it definitely just went away. And now it's back. Okay, so yeah, it's definitely on your end. I don't know if I have controls, but I'll try. So what we're going to do, so if you're listening on the podcast, then my encouragement to you is to stop right here. If you haven't listened to last week's, and go back to last week's, listen to the debate, because this is kind of the continuation of that. And so it'll be kind of weird if you, are expecting to, have the, understand some of what might be happening. So
get the context, right?
Yeah,
get the context, get the conversation, the foundation of the conversation, and then join this Q&A.
Yeah, and so the Q&A, and anyone can come in, ask questions of either Bill or myself, and or just of anything. As folks know, with the show here, we will answer any questions, but we usually try to devote the first hour to the topic. And so what the questions that we have are actually questions the students at the Academy had asked. And Drew has the list of questions, and we've highlighted from the ones that were already answered in the debate. And so Drew is going to ask the questions of both Bill and I. Now, I will admit, because Bill had mentioned this, there are a larger number of questions for Bill than me. And many of the questions that were of me, were asked at the time, because he was trying to, there were questions for both of us. And so there's a lot more questions for Bill, but that should be expected, by the way, because it was at a Christian school. So there's typically, if you have people who they're going to ask questions challenging the person on the opposite side. So
That's exactly right. When I was in New Orleans seminary with James, it was like 95% to me. So you're right.
Yeah. I mean, we had 7 questions for both of us, 5 for me, and 20 for Bill. So if you take the ones for both and for me, that's 12, and there's still 20 for so, and that's usual. So for folks who may be new to this channel, this podcast, I'm good with that, because it means Bill gets more of the time to explain his views. And for folks who don't understand why I do that, I've gotten in the habit. Someone asked, so I've tried to start explaining this, but I'm okay with having people on the show that give them more time to explain their particular views or positions, because I have next week, right? Next week, I could do a whole show responding to Bill. Bill could still come in, and he's welcome to do that. But so if people sometimes go, well, why are you letting this person speak and not challenging them? Because there's, I think, no need to really challenge when, I'm trying to give my guest more of the time. And we've done.
Plus there's really no time restraints, because there's, in terms of response, right? We have all the time to respond to Bill. Plus, we can stretch this out into however many episodes we want in order to respond to everything. So we're not restricted by time as we would be, say, if we were on a stage somewhere. Yeah,
when people are looking at their watch going, hey, it's dinner time. I want to get out of here for dinner. All right. So Drew, I'm going to hand this over to you at this point, and you can ask the questions. So Bill and I both respond, but you could pick which one of us responds first, or however.
So I will say to the audience that's watching on YouTube and on Facebook, if you have a question, make sure you write who you want the question addressed to at the beginning, and then your question. If it's for Andrew, write Andrew, and then the question, or if it's for both, put both, and then the question, and then we'll go with that accordingly. So let's start. I think we need to, in this Q&A, let's lay a good foundation. So what I'll open up with is a question to Andrew to kind of lay the foundation from the Christian perspective. Who is Jesus?
Yeah, and that was one of the questions. By the way, I'm going to just do this real quick. I'll take the thing off. People were asking Bill's last name. It's Kluck, K-L-U-C-K. So someone had asked that. So, all right. So who is Jesus? Well, first off, I will say he was a historical figure. I think Bill will agree with that. There are some who argue against that, but he was a historical figure. Bill's holding up a book, Jesus, My Thing in Action. So we'll have to let him explain it. So
Jesus mything in action.
Oh,
By
myth.
David
Oh,
Fitzgerald.
Mything.
okay.
Mything.
So I would say that Jesus was truly God and truly man. So he was God, eternal God, who came into his own creation as a man, lived a life sinlessly, never breaking God's law, going to the cross as a payment of sin for his own creation. So that would be a quick, and I'm going to try to give answers quickly. I'm not, because Bill and I both, we went to dinner before the debate. We could talk all night. I'm going to try to be concise in my answers so we can get through all of them, hopefully. And so that'd be as concise of an answer I can give. I mean, there's a lot more we could say. John, the writer of the Gospel of John said that, we could fill, tons of books and,
Well, and I'm on the same page you are, Andrew. I do believe Jesus existed for several reasons. The criteria of embarrassment, multiple attestation, there's good reasons to believe Jesus existed.
Okay. So that was going to be my next question, was to turn it over to you, Bill, and to say, as an atheist, do you believe Jesus was an actual person? But since you've already affirmed that, let me kind of change the direction of the question. What is it about Jesus that you may believe or disagree with the Christian perspective about who Jesus was?
Oh, wow. Where do you begin? First of all, like in Mark 6, they're saying they're trying to get Jesus out, because he couldn't do any miracles and his family is trying to, shoo him away. So that has a, ring of verisimilitude. And there's several things in the gospel which, seem to indicate we're dealing with a real person. This isn't Mormonism where it's cardboard characters, that these are real life, like Peter denying Jesus. I mean, who would write that, So you have this criteria of embarrassment. Even John Dominic Crossan says two things that are historically certain: that Jesus was baptized by John. That's embarrassing because you would expect Jesus to be baptizing John. It's a baptism of repentance. And Jesus was crucified is one of the secure facts in history, and Bart Ehrman and other skeptics of Christianity would agree with that. My thing would be that in Mark you have more of a Jesus, that's more human, that does perform some miracles, but it's totally different than the Gospel of John, where you have Jesus saying, I'm the vine, I'm the way, the life, the truth, I'm the bread of life. You have all those I am statements, which are totally contrary to the messianic secret in Mark, where he said, hey, don't tell anybody who I am. So, and you have the adoptionist theology in Mark, where Jesus is adopted at his baptism. There's no birth narrative in Mark, where in Matthew and Luke, he has a divine birth. And in John, he's the Logos from the beginning of the world. So it's a trajectory. I would believe, if you read Bart Ehrman's book, How Jesus Became God, it looks like Christians, the church, imposed deity upon Jesus. So it's a very complex question.
Okay, gotcha. Let's stay along the same lines of laying a foundation. Let's move into a little bit of testimony. Andrew, when did you become saved?
Well, some would question whether I still am. No.
Well, they questioned me. That's for sure.
No, so I got saved at the age of 16 from a Jewish family. It was one where, for folks who don't understand Judaism and whatnot, it is not something that my parents went casket shopping. I'll just put it that way. It's something that is, Bill was mentioning embarrassment. Having a child become a Christian in a Jewish home is an embarrassment. And so it was, so I got saved at 16. I got saved, my testimony, I know, is if you listen to Andrew Rappaport's Rappaport and just look for, I think, personal testimony, you'll probably find it comes up a couple times. I've been on several different podcasts sharing it, the longer version. So, but that's the short version was, so people who want to do the math, it was 1984. I know, Drew, you weren't even born. I get it. But
2 years later, I was. 2 years later. Okay. So now, along those same lines, in the opposite direction, Bill, I know you mentioned a lot of the things that you disagree with about the Christian view of Jesus and who Jesus was. Does that also play into why you are an atheist, or why you say you left Christianity to become an atheist?
Yeah, well, I became a Christian at 17. It's funny when you're in those teenage years. It's like a lot of people like Bart Ehrman, Michael Sherman, all of us became Christians, like, in our teens, and Andrew, of course. But I was at a Sunday school class at Colonial Baptist Church in Cary, North Carolina, and someone said, "Hey, Bart Ehrman's going to be at the Barnes and Noble." I went, "Who's Bart Ehrman?" So I went there, and I went, "Whoa, I have no idea about Christian scholarship, New Testament scholarship." And I started reading every book he wrote, and and by the way, he's on our YouTube thing. We had more views with our thing with Bart Ehrman than any other person.
Okay. So you've mentioned Bart Ehrman several times. I'm guessing you've read a lot of Bart Ehrman's books and heard probably a lot of his lectures and or debates. Sure. What's your opinion about, and this is getting into a little bit of textual criticism, what is your opinion about the variants in the Bible?
Well, Bart Ehrman's famous line, there's more words in the New Testament, or more errors in the New Testament manuscripts than there are words in the New Testament. Like, estimates are like he estimated 400,000. I've actually heard Christians say it's 500,000. But the key is most of the variants are inconsequential, obviously, misspellings, word order, whatever. But there are some, I asked him this, when he was giving a talk in Chapel Hill, there are some that affect theological doctrines, like nor the Son. No one knows the day or the hour, neither the angels in heaven nor the Son. So some manuscripts don't have that, some do. So if Jesus doesn't know the time and hour, it does have theological implications. The Johannine comma, where it says these three bear testimony, the Father, the Son, and some manuscripts have water, some have spirit. So these things do affect, like when Jesus is in the garden and he's sweating blood. A lot of manuscripts leave that out. Some have him sweating blood to combat docetic heresies. And Bart Ehrman's scholarly book, Orthodox Corruption of Scripture, he goes into that, where it's mostly these variants and these corrections that the scribes do are to combat docetic heresies, where they believe Jesus wasn't really human. He just appeared from the word docetus.
So let me, I don't know if I mentioned in the debate, but I definitely taught the students, the way they count the numbers would be more like 500,000. And there's a different, I think that the argument that Bart Ehrman makes is an apples to orange comparison. So the issue here is you're taking something like Lord Jesus Christ, Lord Christ, Jesus Christ, Christ Jesus as four different variances. That's how they get that. I mean, how do you have 400,000 or 500,000 variances when you only have 138,000 Greek words in the New Testament, right? Well, that's how they get it. There's different variant readings. So what I actually did was I went through the Greek New Testament and looked for how many words, period, have a variance, because that's what you need to do the comparison. The comparison needs to be between all the words in the Greek that have variant readings. It doesn't matter how many variant readings, just that they have a variant reading. And you compare that to the number of words. And so when you do that, you have about 36,000 words, of which, or 3,600 words, of which if you use the 1%, which is what I think Bart Ehrman would use as a conservative number, really, Daniel Wallace would say it's 1/5 of 1%, are in the meaningful and viable. That means we can't get back to the original and it changes the meaning. And so you're talking about like 36 words. But real quick, no man knows the day or the hour. The problem that most people have with that is they don't understand Jewish idioms. When I first heard someone trying to explain that passage, he spent 20 minutes trying to explain it. I just asked him afterwards, I'm like, why didn't you just say it's a Jewish idiom? And he was like, what? Yeah, it's an idiom referring to marriage, that the son doesn't know the day or hour that he's going to get married. Only the father knows, and he's supposed to be living in expectancy, like as if any moment could be the moment. And if you read the context there, that's exactly what it talks about, living as if Christ could come back at any moment. So it fits with the idiom. Now there is, we could say the idiom that we know of today, the way Jewish people would use it, doesn't include the angels. I think the reason is because somewhere in Rabbinic Judaism, they stopped believing in angels. There's many Jewish people today that don't believe in angels. Maybe they dropped it for that. Maybe it was part of the original idiom. So I don't think that actually changes the meaning of anything. And if we say, well, we can't get back to the original, see, it's not changing the meaning of who Christ is, because we have to understand the language as an idiom. And as far as the Johannine thing of the 3 in 1, I never use that to defend the Trinity. So it doesn't. Me neither. Yeah, it's not, and that's the point. The issue being is there a Christian doctrine? Mm-hmm. For Christian doctrine, it had to be solely on that one passage. Like if that passage in John is all we have to prove the Trinity, then you know, Bill makes an excellent point. Right. Mm-hmm. But I never turn to that one ever when defending.
There's another one. They're being justified by Jesus. We have peace with God. Is it justified, or are we being justified? And Bruce Metzer gave that passage an A. So the difference is, are we justified? Is this a finished thing, or is it a work in progress? So it has a theological implication, and there's manuscripts that have it one way and manuscripts that have it the other. And the good news is we have 5,000 Greek manuscripts, Syriac, Coptic, all sorts of
more than 5,000 now. Yeah, we're up to like 8 or 9. Yeah. So by the way, it looks like Bill has some fans in the house here. I don't know who Daniel Ray is, but he says,
he's
hey,
at Watchman Fellowship. He's on staff there.
He says hello to you. I'm going to assume he just had a typo there, unless your nickname is Bull. Bull Clock.
So you might change after the thing here.
Okay. Andrew, is there anything else you wanted to add to that explanation of some of those passages, whether it be the Comma Johannium or? No,
I think I hit it. Yeah, I mean, my only point with it would be I don't think any of those change the theological belief we have, because we don't rely on those.
Well, and there's one that says Jesus is it compassionate toward the lepers? You know, he healed 9 lepers, and then, you know, he goes, my God, if I have to heal one more leper, I'm going to go crazy. And then the other translation, one manuscript has, he was angry at the lepers. So it impacts the nature of Jesus, but it's, you know.
Well, but if we didn't have that, right?
It wouldn't,
it wouldn't affect anything.
Yeah. So we're on the same page.
Yeah.
Okay. So Andrew, this is for you. Is it important to you that things in the Bible seem so out there that they couldn't have been written by man?
Yeah. And I didn't mark this as being one that was asked because it was worded differently. There was a question like this during the debate. So, and when I think of it with the quote unquote out there, you know, things like talking donkeys, axes floating in water, the sun standing still for an hour. These are things that we look at in the natural world and say, well, that doesn't happen. So is it important that the things in the Bible seem so out there that they couldn't have been written by man? Well, I don't think that if it's out there, it means it couldn't have been written by man, because I've read the Book of Mormon and Doctrine and Covenants, and they're further out there. I mean, not so much Book of Mormon, but like the other, you know, where they start saying that the Heavenly Father had a wife from another planet, and, you know, that's out there, right? In an attempt to explain where God came from. So I don't think that it's out there. One of the things that did come up in the debate, Bill brought up in the debate, the zombies, as he referred to them in Matthew. And my point there was, you know, like Bill's point was, hey, they're like, there's just this comment about people coming up from the dead. And my point with that is what we see in the writing of human beings, that people wouldn't just say something like that and move on. They say something supernatural or out there, and they explain it. The fact of what you see in the Bible is there's just these things that are just mentioned and moved on. Like that's one of them. It just mentions people rose from the dead and were preaching about Jesus and move on to the next topic. That is not what we'd see if it was human written.
So
Typically.
one thing that you can help me with this, Andrew, I was in at Mid-Cities Theological Discussion. We used to meet at IHOP. And I said, well...
Okay, hold on. I got to stop you for 1 second for the audience. Some people, you're probably not aware. IHOP is, for some people that don't know, International House of Pancakes, not the group International House of Prayer. Okay, continue.
So I brought up the part in Leviticus where if a woman has her period, you take her away. She can't touch any lamps or beds or anything because it would be unclean. So she has to go and be secluded for what, Andrew? A couple weeks or?
I'd have to look it up again.
Whatever. She's secluded. So I said, look, girls, does that sound like a guy, a man, a Jewish man is writing this, or does it sound like God is writing this? And they go, well, obviously it's God, because that's a great idea to have them secluded for 2 weeks in their period. I went, I can't win with you guys.
That's funny. That's
okay,
funny.
Before you get to the next question, just a programming note. David O is saying, Andrew, just a heads up, Bill's mic is much lower compared to yours and Drew's. I was trying to fix something with his with that echo sound we were getting, and so I had turned off the automatic volume. I turned it back on. So just let me know if that in the chat. Let me know if that's sounding. No. I think it was something I did on my end.
Okay.
So we'll see.
Okay. Now let's stay on the topic of text, the text, just for one moment. And then I want to shift gears a little bit because of some of the questions that have come in. But during the debate, the topic of Matthew 24 came up. And I want to ask this in two parts. I want to ask it to Andrew one way, and then Bill, I want to ask it to you in another. Andrew, when you're talking about Matthew 24, your argument was that when Jesus is speaking, he's speaking of the generation that would see the signs that he mentions would take place. So my question for you is, how do you explain Jesus's use of the second person pronoun you when he's talking to that group?
Is this just because you want to push your post-millennial?
Yes. It was going through my head when I was watching the debate. So I said, I've got to ask him this question.
As you're asking the crowd, I'm going, that wasn't from the students. This is a Drew personal. Okay, so Matthew 24, right? It says, Jesus came out from the temple and was going away with his disciples. And Bill, just if you could mute when you're not. Yeah, sorry.
I got it.
I don't know what it is. It's something that started with StreamYard, and we thought we fixed it last week. But sometimes the guests, we have this problem. I don't know why it is. But okay, so Jesus came out from the temple and was going away when his disciples came up to point out the temple buildings to him. And he said to them, do you see these things? Truly, I say to you, not one will be left upon the other, which will not be torn down. So he's talking there. Just the idea here is that they were, if you look at the geography, they were looking over the beautiful gold dome that would be of the temple, and the temple was like the big thing that they focused on. This gets into the whole issue of signs, what to look for, right? So it says he was sitting on the Mount of Olives. The disciples came to him privately saying, tell us when these things will happen and what will be the sign of your coming at the end of the age. So after this, Jesus is going to start talking about the fact that he is, all these different things that are signs. And so the argument is that he's going to say that the generation, I'm trying to see which verse specifically, if Drew offhand. You know what? I could do it this way. Hold on. I'll just, in my log, I'll just search for generation. I could spell. Generation doesn't have a U in it. Generation. All right. So it is verse 34. All right.
Yep, there it is.
So he said so he's explaining all the signs, right? He's speaking of things right from the beginning in verse 24. He's saying, okay, see that no one misleads you. Okay, so who's he speaking to there? Is it just the disciples, or is this more general to more people? Well, clearly, as you read through this, he has a wider audience than just the disciples. You'll hear rumors of wars and earthquakes and all this stuff. So when he talks about and now I've lost the verse. Was it 34, right?
34.
Yeah. Okay. And so he gets down context 32. Now learn the parable of the fig tree. Its branch has already become tender and puts forth its leaves. You know its summer is near. So you too, when you see all things, recognize that he is near, right at the door. Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until these things take place. So he's saying to those who are hearing him there, I say to you, this generation. Now, the generation there is a definitive article. Okay. So the issue is who does that refer to? Not who does the you refer to? And so this generation will not pass away until these things take place, I would say is the generation that sees the olive branch in verse 32, right? The one that sees the signs.
So let me draw out that question a little more. In verse 33, when Jesus says, so you too, when you see all these things, before he even starts talking about generation there, when he says, when you also see these things. So are you saying he's talking in a broader generality that's still connected to the generation that sees those signs?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
So
I know that doesn't work well with your theology. I get it, Drew.
Well, it doesn't.
And for Bill, this is like a common joke we do each week is at some point we have to bust on his post-millennialism and he busts on my premillennialism.
I'm just saying it doesn't matter my thoughts about this at the moment because this is a conversation between you and Bill. I'm just moderating, but I'm just throwing questions out.
Yeah, on purpose. So David is saying if Bill can move the mic closer to his mouth. So
my point is, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, that Dale Allison has written a book. He's the expert, Resurrecting Jesus. He says in the epilogue, Jesus was wrong. So he's a Christian, but he recognizes that Jesus was wrong on this point. He made a false prediction. Bart Ehrman, both of these scholars came to the same conclusion that we best understand Jesus as an apocalyptic prophet who had a bad weekend in Jerusalem.
So Bill, the question I was going to ask you that's kind of along the same lines. Are you familiar with the late Christopher Hitchens?
Of course, yeah.
Okay. So some years ago, Christopher Hitchens did a debate tour with Douglas Wilson. And I'm going to ask all of our listeners to shoulder their views of Doug Wilson, okay? Don't crucify me. But he did a debate tour with Douglas Wilson, and he raised the very question that you asked. He said Jesus was wrong. He predicted his own coming, and he said he was wrong. How do you explain that? And so Wilson's response was that Jesus was talking about the destruction of the temple and his coming in judgment. And so my question to you is, given what Christopher Hitchens asked, which is along the lines of your same question of Jesus being wrong, what are your thoughts about the view that this wasn't his second bodily coming, but this was a coming of destruction on the temple?
It could be and people ask me, they go, why do you put so much emphasis on the scholars like Dale Allison? They're the experts. They're the ones that know the Greek. They're the ones that have written all these books on Jesus. So I just have to go with what the experts say. And it could be, who knows? You could be right. That view might be the right view.
Okay. Andrew, is there anything you want to piggyback out on that?
No.
Oh, okay. So we'll move on. We'll get into a little bit of creation, evolution. Bill, do you believe in the Big Bang Theory, even though there is scientific evidence against it?
Well, obviously, by the way, we're having Lawrence Krauss on at the book club next month. And obviously he would believe in the Big Bang, and it was the background radiation is an evidence. The universe we found was expanding with the Hubble find back 100 years ago or whatever. So if it's expanding and it's going faster as it gets out there further, then it makes sense that if you wind it back, it had a beginning. And they say they can get back to 10 to the minus 43rd Planck time. How in the world you can go back from 13.7 billion years?
Uh-oh.
What just happened to Bill?
He might have touched something, which is what his wife warned him against.
Teresa.
Okay, he's all right. I'm going to mute him until he gets back on camera. He's calling for his girlfriend to help out. Sorry. There we go.
There he is.
Oh, we got the wrong camera though.
Hold on. He's muted.
Yeah. You got to unmute yourself, and then if we could just stick on that view. You don't know how to switch the camera.
Okay. So can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep. We can hear you.
We'll work on the camera later. So so there seems to be evidence the background radiation discovered years ago and so forth. But what's interesting, I was in a creation evolution class, and we talked for ages about this stuff, and I learned a lot about science and so forth. But when I came here to Dallas, all they wanted to talk about was Calvinism. And so, it's like, gosh, did I just waste years doing this?
They want to talk about good stuff.
Yeah. All right. So Andrew, do you want a chance to respond to the idea of the Big Bang Theory and evolution?
Yeah, I mean, look, the issue with the Big Bang, and Bill, you just unmute yourself when you want to talk. And so the Big Bang, I mean, as the person said in the question, there's science evidence against it. I'm drawing a blank on the name of the mathematician that calculated that Big Bang is mathematically impossible. The Big Bang requires something to first be there, right? And so, Stephen Hawking in his book says that there was nothing and that nothing was actually something. Well, nothing is what rocks dream of. Nothing's not something and something's not nothing. So
yeah, Lawrence Krauss wrote a book, A Universe from Nothing, and he believes you have quantum fluctuations. But still, how do you get this expansion, this inflation that just so fast the universe expands to 100,000 light years or whatever? I mean, it's just incredible. And it has to expand at just the right rate. If it goes too fast, you won't get galaxies formed. If it goes too slow, you just get a big crunch into a black hole. So this thing has to be extremely precise. And you have all these fine-tuning things like the gravitational constant, the energy density, which is 10 to the 60th. The energy density of empty space is 10 to the 120th. So all these things have to go just right for this to work.
Yeah, and actually that works against you because everything has to be just right, and that math doesn't work. I mean, I that's why I say the magic of evolution is you just keep adding more years to it to make the math work. And that's why, because when I was a kid, the universe was, a few 100 billion years old, or a million years old. Now it's billions of years old. I think the latest number is 5 or 6 billion. It keeps increasing.
13.7 billion.
Oh, there we go. So I haven't kept up on it, right? But they keep adding time, and I think that because the math doesn't work for it. The thing is, God just creates everything out of nothing. So how do you get the expansion? Because God created it. I mean, he can do that. The fact that you have nothing that somehow becomes everything how could that even be when we compare, like, having God create something and have it expanding is not outside the realm of what we see. Nothing becoming everything without any mind, any force to create it. That's magic.
So Bill, I would a question I have is, do you believe that there are such things as miracles?
That's a tough one, because I had witnessed a miracle when my girlfriend, aerobics teacher in Durham, North Carolina, had her shoulder dislocated or whatever, and the doctor said 6 weeks to heal. And then the next day she was teaching aerobics, and I went to the doctor and I said, "What do you think of that miracle?" And he goes, "She's a mighty healer." And it's like, so yeah. And we've had the people on that have written books about miracles. And when you look at the New Testament, you just have to give an example. Jesus walking on water. Okay, we got to try to see, is this historical? Is this a real historical event? And the problem is, in Mark, Jesus walks on the water, but in Matthew, you have Jesus and Peter walking on the water. So which is true? And is that diversity? Does that add credibility to it? The problem is, it's a one-time event. We can't say, hey, get the camera over here and let's get a different angle and do this again. So we just have to go by the testimony of the maybe witnesses, and it's a who knows.
Well, so the reason I asked that question is because if evolution and the Big Bang is true, then that would be a miracle that our Earth ended up where it is, the distance it is from the sun, to where the moon is from the Earth, for gravity to have its constant in our world, for us to be able to have the air that we're breathing. So it seems like it takes a lot of faith to be someone who holds to the Big Bang and evolution, rather than believing that there was, God who just created by the word of his mouth.
Can you guys see this?
1/157?
37, yeah.
Oh.
So it gets worse. The fine structure constant is 1/137. If this thing isn't just right, if it's too big, you won't get chemistry. If it's too small, things don't go right. And if this thing isn't just right, you don't get carbon forming in stars with supernovas. So Richard Feynman, one of the great physicists, said every physicist should look at this number and worry. So it's just so much things that have to go precisely right for this to all happen. And evolution, man, it's so complex, because you look at some things like endogenous retroviruses that we have on lemurs and chimpanzees that seem to indicate a common ancestor. And why would God put these endogenous retroviruses there? And you have the homology and the well evolution, where you seem to have a nice little trend of fossils showing this. But then again, you have the Cambrian explosion, where most of the major phyla, like echinoderms, chordatas, things with backbone like us, trilobites, whatever, all these major phyla, jellyfish and so forth, seem to arrive on the scene 540 million years ago, all at once. Now, you look at the other side and they'll go, oh, well, there is Precambrian precursors that led to these major phyla. So it's extremely complex, and right now we're having a big debate with Joshua Swamidass, who says, hey, you can have an Adam and Eve 6,000 years ago, and then William Lane Craig saying, oh no, Heidelbergensis man 750,000 years ago was the original Adam. And I just heard today that 950,000 years ago, the human species almost went extinct. It was down to 1,200. And what's interesting in this recent thing I watched is William Lane Craig goes, well, we'll just have to keep up with the new post and the new events. It's like, well, are you supposed to base your faith on the latest science, on the next round of genetic research? And so it's extremely difficult, extremely confusing. And what I preach and to the kids out there is, it's okay to have doubt and uncertainty, because these things you have to be an expert in genetics and phylogeny, all sorts of things to really understand this stuff.
You know, it's funny, Andrew, because it sounds like he's pointing out the same problems with William Lane Craig that we point out with William Lane Craig.
Well, I told him that. Yeah.
In the book
Andrew,
we're talking about is the quest for historical Adam. And see, you have things like Reasons to Believe that says, oh, well, Adam was 120,000 years ago, and that the Neanderthals were soulless hominids, where William Lane Craig would say, oh, no, those are us. They're our fellow, cousins and stuff, Neanderthals. So, and then Biologos would have another issue. So it's all over the place. And, it's fascinating. You do learn a lot about genetics and research and radiometric dating. So this stuff I talk to the young people. And by the way, these questions you guys asked at Legacy are just amazing. I'm just so impressed with your guys, knowledge on this stuff.
Yeah, that was true. And let me just recommend with what Bill's saying, there's a DVD, but I'm sure you can get it in like streaming nowadays, but Privileged Planet is I think the name of it. And it goes through all the I mean, if I remember correctly, they said that, it's the chance of everything being so perfect is, 1 to the power of like 127.
Oh, it's just incredible. And that's just one thing. Like we had Stephen Meyer on, and we said, what's the chances of a protein forming? Because you have all these amino acids. First of all, they have to be left-handed. You got the chirality problem, the handedness, where they have to be all left-handed. And then the chance of one of those, like getting 150 amino acids in the right order to form a protein, these things have to be folded just right too. It's just incredible. So, there's just so many difficulties, and you have to have the polysaccharides, the nucleotides, the lipids. The membrane is just not that simple. It's semi-permeable. So how in the world do you get life off the ground?
That's why Frank Turek says he doesn't have enough faith to be an atheist, right? Because you have the left-handed aminos, right hand. We only see one, but they both have to have been there, and so there's so many things when you look at the ideas that people have of the creation of the universe and life that just do not add up without there being a creator. The amino acids, you have the fact of, the oxygen level. I mean, there's a ton. And so, yeah.
Now, Andrew, did you want to touch on the evolution question or respond to Bill's answer?
I think he did a good job of exposing the problems that evolution has.
Well, and another quick example, evolution is supposed to be one of the best evidences for evolution. But for the life of me, I can't see how Pakicetus, a land-dwelling, looks like a little cow on land, somehow over the brief time of 10 million years goes to Amblicitus, Duoderms, and Basilosaurus, and eventually turns into what we have today, whales. I mean, it just, I don't get it.
Well, I would like to ask a question to both of you along the same lines of what you just asked is when we look at evolution by necessity means that organisms have to gain information. They have to gain new information into themselves in order to evolve. Now, what scientists have noticed is that no organism has ever gained information. We've only seen it decrease in information. So, do either of you want to speak to the idea of?
Let me correct your question. To be more precise. So we do see a gain of information. It's a mutation. We've seen mutations.
Sure. Okay. Yeah.
What's required is a beneficial, reproducible adding of information.
Right.
Cancer is the adding of information. Right.
Is this a mutation?
Beneficial? No. Now, some will argue if you have, they'll talk about celiac disease with malaria and say, see, here's something that is beneficial and reproducible, but it is beneficial only to those who are getting malaria and deadly to like everybody else. So it's really not it's positive only in helping with malaria, but that's kind of more that's not what actually ends. I mean, it still will kill people if they're, not eating properly. So to be more specific, no, we don't see any beneficial reproducible adding of information to the DNA. And yes, it would require, evolution will require so many of them, even if man was millions of years on Earth, it would require so many of these changes. We should be seeing it everywhere. And when we actually look at the fossils, we actually look at the evidence, we see gaps. And that's why you end up having people say, well, instead of it being this slow change, there was something that occurred that made really quick changes. And that's why we don't see all the transitional forms. We just see fully formed.
And there was a debate between James Tour and Professor Dave recently, and it's one of the most dynamic debates you'll ever see. The problem is they cite papers, and the words they use, I can't understand half the words they use. So, but I do kind of see James Tour's point that when you have these reactions, here's one of the problems. It's not that you get too much leftover stuff, too many chemicals and byproducts that can mess up the reactions. So that's, a big problem. And I've heard other chemists say the same thing, that the excess of byproducts can mess up these reactions and be deleterious to the progress. But the problem is they need to tell us so we can understand it. Stephen Meyer, when he interviewed James Tour, actually did a pretty good job saying, tell us so we can understand this stuff. But it's extremely complex, and we just have to try to figure it out.
Okay, let me get to a question here that we highlighted for Bill. Where did we come from? Why are we here? And where are we going?
I don't know where we came from. I guess, why are we here? Who knows? I mean, as an atheist, what you have to do is just existentially try to eke out some meaning in life. Because ultimately, if the heat death of the universe, the sun expanding, and just Earth being ultimately destroyed, it's all going to be meaningless. So, with myself, I play pickleball, I do art, and which is very rewarding. So I try to find, meaning there. And where are we going? Here's the thing: we don't know. There's been mass extinctions, the Permian, the Jurassic extinction, or the KT with the KT boundary and all of that. There seems to be just these big extinction events, and Hugh Ross even says we're one good supernova from going extinct, so it could be less, and I think he says it's less than 100,000 years. So my point to Christians is Jesus said, I go to prepare a place for you, a mansion. I wouldn't tell you if it wasn't true. So the thing is, if you're putting your faith in Jesus in that mansion in the sky, man, it's going to be a big leap. It might be true, but there's a lot of problems with it.
And so this is probably why the original debate topic that I had asked for Bill and I to debate was secular humanism is superior to Christianity, because that would actually have to make Bill argue for secular humanism, which, as you can see, he's going to have a hard time doing, because the studies show that people who truly believe in atheism and secular humanism that don't believe there's an afterlife, studies show that they are more willing to mistreat people because they don't think there's going to be consequences in the next life. And as far as the extinctions, there's only one extinction that we really know of. It's called the flood extinction.
Well, I took a class in Legends and Genesis at the University of North Carolina. I asked the guy, he just destroyed it with the P and J. Genesis is a blended narrative with the P writer saying 7 days for the flood, or 40 days, and the P writer saying 150, and distinctions. And if you don't know Hebrew, you can't really tell what's going on. But I said, hey, just tell me straight out. Did this flood happen or not? Was there a glow? And he looks at, and he was Catholic, and he looks at me like I'm crazy. He goes, it'd have to be 0%. It's like, hey, you might not realize this being in your little Catholic bubble and here at the university, but people believe there was a global flood.
Well, actually, it's kind of interesting, because even Discovery Channel did a show where they looked at the Grand Canyon, and they too believed that there was a flood, but it wasn't global. And yet they were looking at the evidence that was all showing that, yeah, it's there. They just don't want to believe the evidence that's in front of them.
And again, you have Hugh Ross's ministry, Reasons to Believe, local flood. So there's different views.
Okay, now let's I want both of you to comment on the famous C.S. Lewis quote that God is either a liar, a lunatic, or he's Lord. Andrew, you can go first.
Okay. And I was going to say, we'll let Bill go first since I went first last time. But since you said that,
no, I didn't. I thought I asked Bill the first question last time.
Oh, did you? Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I would say this. I think that the idea of the quote, I'm not sure if it's original with C.S. Lewis, but he's most known for it, is you really have one of three scenarios of who Christ is. Either he lied about being God. He knew he wasn't God. He lied about it, in which case he's a liar. We shouldn't be following him. Or he's a complete lunatic that he thinks he is God. And again, then we shouldn't follow him. Or he actually is who he claimed he is. He's Lord. And the evidence we have that he is Lord is that he said he would raise himself from the dead after 3 days. And that's what he did. Dead people rot. They don't raise themselves from the dead because they're, dead. And so the fact that Jesus could say he will raise himself from the dead and then be seen by over 500 witnesses, that is the proof that he is who he claimed to be, that he was God or is God.
Okay, this is one of my favorite questions. There's a fourth alternative, which C.S. Lewis didn't say, and that's called legend. So we have legendary embellishment where, like the zombies in Matthew, where, the dead saints rising and so forth. Clearly, even Mike Lacone and William Lane Craig say this is just apocalyptic talk. So the problem is, what is legendary? What is historical and what's legendary? There's a lot of legendary embellishment, like the whole book of John. We were talking about the Jesus seminar. All the 70 premier scholars said none of that comes back to Jesus. So, and again, if you read Barterman's book, How Jesus Became God, they imposed deity upon Jesus. Jesus, and if you look at Mark, he didn't think of himself as God. That was later legendary, embellishment.
So, in along the same lines of that, when you bring in legendary, do you think it would be fair to say that same standard could apply to what we know of historical men who came before Jesus, such as Julius Caesar and things like that?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because, Julius Caesar, we have hostile witnesses, which we don't have with Jesus. Him crossing the Rubicon, things wouldn't have worked out the way they did in the Civil War if it wasn't for him crossing the Rubicon. So, and we have hostile witnesses. With Jesus, we just have believers that are writing, and they say so that you might believe. So that's the problem. We would like to have outside critical references instead of such biased accounts. Does that make sense?
Yeah, let me real quick address one thing, and I'll just share my screen real quick so we could see. The argument that Mark was the first gospel and doesn't really mention about Jesus being God. Well, let's take a look. Here's all the verses in Mark that refer to Jesus as being God directly or indirectly. So when we say, Mark really doesn't talk about Jesus being God, I'm moving slowly. And when you see a 2 in parentheses, it means that there's 2 different references to his deity in a single verse. And so just as I go through this, you end up realizing that depending on whether you take how would you deal with the longer ending of Mark, whether you consider that to be scripture or not. I don't. So what you have is 405 of, references to Jesus being God in the 666 verses. Or if you want to look just at the verses, 311 verses out of 678. That's 46% rounded up. So 46% of the Gospel of Mark refers to Jesus as God. And if that's the best you have to say that it's embellished in what you say is the first of them, half the gospel refers to Jesus as God. I think that's pretty strong. That very early, even by what you'd say, Bill, is the earliest document supports.
But in Mark, he seems to, have the messianic, hey, don't tell anybody, who I am, the messianic secret. He's speaking in parables, totally different in John, where all he does is talk about himself. I'm the way, he who believes in me will never die. I mean, what a difference. Did Mark just not get the memo?
No, because Mark wanted to prove that he was a servant. And actually, not just Mark, but the others, you see that really Jesus would say that to the Jewish people. He had no problem saying to Gentiles, letting them spread it. So it was a thing that was specific to the knowledge that he had as being God. What might happen if everyone started sharing that he is the Messiah, it would, and Scripture even says that he had to go hide because they were going to make him king. So, yeah. So I'm just, the point being is, if people want to say, well, Mark doesn't speak about Jesus being God, well, okay, almost half of Mark refers to Jesus as God. Granted, the Gospel of John, there's going to be more in the Gospel of John, but to argue that Jesus didn't say it, that Mark didn't point it out, is just not accurate.
Well, in Mark, where he healed the paralytic, I think they went through the roof. Remember that? Yeah. And he said, what's easier, to have your sins forgiven? And that has a degree of verisimilitude that I can see Pharisees saying, oh my gosh, what are you doing healing him on the Sabbath or whatever, and nitpicking him, And so you just have to tease it out and say, is this historical? And that's what scholars like Dale Allison do. They look at each miracle and event in the life of Jesus on a case-by-case basis, and they try to tease it out, whether it's historical. Yeah.
So I mean, just to give you all the Gospels, the Gospel of Matthew is, and numbers are hard to get in audio, I get, but 482 unique verses, okay, that are mentioned out of 1,071 verses altogether. That's 45%. In other words, percentage-wise, Mark refers to Jesus as God more than Matthew does. Luke, who's trying to show that he's a man, is 39%. Now, granted, the Gospel of John, right? That one is basically like, 66, 67%. So yes, that one has the most. But when we look at this, the reality is Mark refers to Jesus as God percentage-wise more than Matthew or Luke. This is something that you don't hear the scholars talk about because they don't look at this the way an engineer would, and that's how I am, right? So percentage-wise, no, Mark speaks of Jesus being God more than any other of the Gospels other than John.
Did you want to respond to
that?
No,
next question.
Okay.
I'll just mention that Stan. Hey, I'm just going to give a shout out to Stan. I used to go to church with Stan, a great guy, but he says 40% of the Gospel of Mark refers to Jesus as God. I didn't know that. Man, were you listening when I was teaching? No. There we go. There's the proof he was sleeping like everyone else when I was teaching.
Oh goodness, Andrew. Andrew. Right,
hey, look, I'm really good at putting people to sleep, I'll have you know. In fact, if you did want to get to sleep, I mean, right now they're still running a sale, a cyber sale, if you wanted to get yourself a good MyPillow. And so the sale is still going on. You could get, I think it's 50% off the MyPillow 2.0. Hey, Drew, if you want to upgrade that pillow you got, now might be the time. You can upgrade it up to 71% off on their Cyber Monday sale. They're still running on their sleepwear, their socks, their accent pillows. You can get all of that with the promo code of SFE, stands for Striving for Eternity. You can get some of the best sales that they have going on right now. And not only would you get yourself a good night's sleep, which, well, if Drew had a better night's sleep, maybe his hair wouldn't fall out. But if you wanted to get a good night's sleep and at the same time support Striving for Eternity, you can go to mypillow.com, use promo code SFE. Great Christmas presents. You need to get something for someone for Christmas and you just don't know what to do. They have the bath towels. They have a whole bunch of things that you can get as a gift that someone will love you for.
Good job. It's a good thing I had my earphones in so my wife didn't hear about the sale for my pillow.
Oh, you want me to send her a text?
No, because she'll say, I want another one.
You'll have to explain the battle that goes on in your house over me gifting you a My Pillow.
Yeah. So Andrew gifted me a My Pillow. I'd never had one before, and I got it, and I loved it. Okay. Then my wife started taking it, and so she started using it. So this is what I did. I got her a My Pillow. And so now she has a My Pillow, I have a My Pillow. And then because our son will come into our bed and sleep into our bed, he started taking my Pillow. So it's just it becomes no longer mine.
Travel size one, which would be perfect for your son.
The dog took my pillow.
Well, we don't have one, but if I did, he would probably take it too. Yeah, he probably would. Okay, so let's get into this question here. That's from Bible Care and Share Fellowship. He asks, how does atheists square the prophecy and history of Israel?
Actually, that's a pretty remarkable prophecy. Who would have known that, when the destruction of the temple, when the Jews went to the diaspora, that they would somehow 2,000 years later, as the Bible predicted, I think in Isaiah, is that right, Andrew? Or Ezekiel, these bones will come alive.
Ezekiel.
In 1948, seems to be a remarkable prophecy.
So to answer the question that Bill just asked, who would have known? God. See, now, folks, for folks listening on the podcast, you this is one where you kind of have to watch to see, like when I'm making a comment like that, so people might think I'm being snarky. Bill's laughing. He's muting himself, but he's laughing. Okay.
Oh goodness. Okay, so let's get. It's funny because I didn't know if we would get through all of these questions, and we've got through.
A good number.
I'm saving one of them towards the end, but we've got through the ones of Andrew, and we've got through a good number of them. Some of these ones that are addressed to Bill, Bill has actually answered, not knowing he was answering that question. So let me look and see. This one is for Bill, and it deals with sort of what we're dealing with now in our culture. Has to do with transgenderism. Where do you stand on the idea of transgenderism and homosexuality?
I'm so glad you asked that. Let me tell you a story. James and I were doing a talk in Tallahassee, Florida, and it was about cults, and it was a conference. And I looked at a table, and this guy was in the table by himself, and I went over to talk to him. And he wrote a book. His name's George Carneal. He wrote a book, Queer for Christ. And I listened to him for like a half hour, just mesmerized by his testimony. He moved to California. He saw the sordid side of homosexuality, how homosexuals can have tons of partners, how they have rape, how it's a very using culture. And he just got disgusted with it and went through all sorts of depression stuff, came to Christ, and now he has a thriving ministry. And I said, George, it's just fantastic what's happened to you, but you do seem to still, it was natural for you to be drawn to men, not women. And he goes, yeah, let me tell you, Bill, I just wanted to test it out. So they got this supermodel, to go and go to him and, try to entice them. And he goes, yeah. So it looks like he just wasn't interested in that sex. So my only thing was, well, George, the problem is, as a Christian, you don't have sex. And he goes, yeah, that's right. So, what's the deal? And here's the thing. In the Bible, in Leviticus, I think it's 20:17, if you're a homosexual, they take you out to the gates and stone you. It gets worse in the New Testament, where it says neither idolaters, nor homosexuals, nor fornicators will inherit the kingdom of God. So now it's an eternity of punishment and, problems there. So it's just a complicated issue. In graduate school, I had a friend, and he goes, Bill, I'm in an all-girls tennis class. He goes, any guy would love it, but it's like meaningless to me. So I can somehow empathize with him, but it's like, man, how can I even comment on it?
Now, it kind of tying that into our discussion on evolution. When we look at, say, the transgender movement, you have men who claim to be women and think they're women, and women who think and claim to be men. One of the things we don't see men through evolution turning into women and vice versa. So what are your thoughts about maybe their mental state? Do you think it's possible that evolution could turn men into women and women into men?
No, not personally, no. It's just, and George was he went through a lot of depression and suicidal he just went through so much trauma, and the relationship's not working out. And as far as the transgender thing, who knows about it? Matt Dillahunty, I don't know if you all saw the recent debate where the guy kind of insulted him about his partner, and he just walked out. So apparently that was very personal to him.
Yeah, my argument, Drew, for this is, I thought this is where you were going to go, but for people who say they're atheists, atheism would be the belief there is no God. It's the idea that we're just chemical reactions. I think transgenderism is a major problem for people who say there is no God and still hold to transgenderism, because if there's no God, we're just purely material entities. We're chemical reactions. There is no immaterial part of us. The reason that becomes important is if I'm born a biological male, my chemistry is male, I'm going to be male. I'm going to do male things. And I can't go again. Saying I identify against my biology right there says there's an immaterial part of me. So when we talk about this whole transgender identity, it disputes atheism, because it is outrightly an appeal to the immaterial part of us, the spirit. It's so right there it becomes a dilemma, I think, for atheists to try to hold to both. Because when you're holding to the transgenderism, you're fundamentally denying the main premise of atheism.
Is there anything you would want to add?
For folks who are listening, Bill shook his head yes and gave a thumbs up.
So what you're saying is Bill is in full agreement with you.
Yeah, well, what it means is that people can't hear his head shakes and you can't see his smiles. Bill's an expressive guy, just for the record. I've learned that. Okay, so last week we're playing the debate, and when I'm standing up there, I can't see Bill behind me all the time. There's a couple times I turn around to see a reaction, just to see, to make sure he understands I'm saying things in jest, or, to see he's not getting offended by something I said. But when I got to watch it, I got to see, so he has got some, I know I do this as well. I make a lot of facial, so I can't hide what I think. Although I'm sitting there with Bill, trying to write as fast as I can with all the things he's bringing up. But yeah, it was fun to watch Bill's face, on the debate as well.
That's why I have a beard, so no one can really tell my facial expressions.
So what are you trying to hide from your wife?
I don't hide anything from my wife.
So shave off that beard and let her see what your facial expressions are.
It's always smiling, always smiling. See, this is my smiling face. See that? All right. So this can be to both of you, and I'll let both of you expound on it. And let me begin with Bill. Do you believe the transgender issue or the homosexual issue? Do you believe that's a moral issue? Do you believe it touches on morality? And especially once you start getting into, say, transgenderism, and you have a man, biologically a man, now claiming to be a woman, who's also trying to do the things we see out in society, play women's sports, use women's bathrooms, force these things upon kids. Do you think this issue is a moral issue?
Seems to be. A problem we have as atheists is they go, well, what do you feel about morality? And what we typically say is flourishing is the key word. We want people to flourish, to have the best lives they can. Like in pickleball, I taught someone today how to be a better pickleball player. So, I try to go and improve people's lives. Like Teresa, my girlfriend, she learned how to swim and, lost a lot of weight. It was something very positive to her. But then you're going to get into problems because what's flourishing to me might not be flourishing to other people. And with the transgender thing, maybe they're flourishing, but maybe they're not. Who knows?
Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, I think my answer will be clear. Yeah, I think it's a moral issue.
Okay.
And the reason I would say that is because where do we get morality from? From the nature of God. God's not transgender. It goes against his nature.
Okay, so that was going to be my next question is because Bill, it sounds like you believe morals exist, that there is such a thing as morality. Where do morals come from, and what is the standard of morality? Is it something that society determines? Is it transcendent?
Well, we had Frank Turk on, and you might be aware he wrote a book, Stealing from God. And his point is that us atheists steal morality from Christians. And that has a certain amount of truth to it, that we're in a Christian culture. So, yeah, I can see myself getting some morality from the Christian culture, values, and so forth. The typical response as atheist is the community set standards that we go by. The problem is, talking about homosexuality, where you all know 50 years ago, this thing was in the closet and it was a crime. My gosh, look, in 50 years, the culture's changed. So the view of homosexuality has changed. And they have a big voice, the transgender and homosexual community, with the they don't have that many numbers, but they have a huge voice. So is that, influencing society? I don't know.
Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know that I have much to really add to it. I mean, I think my position will be clear. I kind of already said, right? I mean, we get it from the nature of God. That's right. I mean, why is lying wrong? Because God's not a liar. Why is stealing wrong? God's not a thief.
Well, and I would say the Bible is clear that homosexuality is wrong. People remember Bishop Spong, James, he was like, the homosexuals loved him because he said, look, you can be a Christian, you can be part of the church, and what's going on today with that. So it's a tough issue. And you have the Apostle Paul, who John Shelby Spong said was a repressed homosexual. And if you read Romans 7, he talks about, I hate this thing that I do. And it's like, well, wait a minute. Most heterosexuals don't hate their, these things. I mean, what in the world is he talking about? And he seems to be, and remember, it was death if you were found out to be a homosexual. So, it's a very minority view, but some people believe he was a repressed homosexual.
Well, you know why would be a difficult view is because it has nothing to do with his sanctification. It has everything to do with his salvation. When you look at the Greek, he actually goes in past tense. So he's talking about himself coming to Christ. What we would hold to is the belief that he clearly would have been married. because he was a Pharisee, and that's a requirement to be a Pharisee. He clearly later is single. He's without a wife. He mentions that. And he talks about abandonment. I believe, my personal belief, I can't prove it from scripture, but just looking at the passage I just mentioned, I believe that his wife abandoned him when he became a Christian. He was a very, very well-known, affluent Jewish rabbi, had the, very, at the time, probably one of the best philosophers, trained under the best teachers. And therefore he would have had a lot of clout. And so in a system that's arranged marriages, whoever arranged a marriage with him probably also was a family that had a lot of clout. And so he becoming a Christian would be a stain on the family of his wife. And so I think that she probably abandoned him. And so that would argue he's, if people are saying, well, he was a repressed homosexual, first off, he was married to a woman, would have had to have been to be a Pharisee. The fact that he wasn't married may have more to do with her leaving, but I don't think, you could use Romans 7 to make the argument at all, because it's a past tense thing referring to his coming to Christ.
Well, it's a minority view, but it's just fascinating to see the influence of Pauline, which we inherited, Pauline Christianity, that this guy is just, people that they go one way all the way or the other way. They don't have a middle ground. That seems to be the Apostle Paul. He's all in one way or the other. And it's interesting to think that if it wasn't for Paul, the co-founder of Christianity might have just pretty much been a small sect in Jerusalem. I mean, Paul just opened it up with, hey, you can eat a pork sandwich. You don't have to get, circumcised. I mean, it's just amazing to think, and to think of him on Mars Hill. Imagine being the only Christian there. And you have all these pagan worshipers, idols. And look, it all changed in a few hundred years where the idols were out, the multi-gods were out, and Christianity was in. It's amazing.
Well, see, I would say that we have a biblical Christianity, a Christocentric Christianity, and Paul was not the co-founder. Paul was a follower. It was Jesus who was the founder and taught it from the beginning. Paul didn't teach it's not like Mormonism where you have Joseph Smith teaching that Jesus, is, or that they're teaching there's one God, and then later Brigham Young teaches others many gods, right? It's not that sort, because there's nothing where you're seeing those kind of contradictions between Paul.
Well, you do, because Jesus had a work salvation where, and remember in Matthew, not one iota of the law will disappear. And here Paul's saying, oh, I count the law as done, and he believed in grace plus nothing. So totally contrary to the soteriology of Jesus.
So did Jesus, but Jesus being God knows the hearts of men and can tell self-righteous men, you have to do works knowing that they won't. And so if you're referring to the rich young ruler, it seems like he's telling him to do works, but Jesus being God, knowing his heart, is calling out the very sin that he knows this guy is not willing to give up on. He's not saying this is the way that people get saved. He's saying for this specific person, here's the one thing you won't give up. But then again, that proves his deity.
Now, Bill, you mentioned Frank Turek. You mentioned his book "Stealing from God." I like to call Frank Turek's book "Stealing from Bonson." But Dee asks a question here. I wonder if Bill has ever watched the Bonson Stein debate. That's a great one.
No.
Okay. So I would encourage you. I think you would really enjoy it. I think you would like that debate. It is a really great debate between Greg Bonson and Gordon Stein.
Yeah, I'll watch it.
Yeah. With all the stuff you've watched, you haven't watched the classic debate.
Like I said, Andrew, you and I spend so much time on this stuff. Gosh, I'm bound to miss something, along the way. People go, "Why do you spend so much time when you're an atheist on this stuff?" And you'll see if you watch the Atheist Christian Book Club with Tim McGrew about the 50-minute mark. I say this is the reason, because Tim McGrew pulled the Greek card on me. So, with these Christian apologists like yourself, Andrew, they're so well read and so, well thought out that you got to really be on your game.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, I mean, you've obviously been missing some things. I mean, you've just discovered Apologetics Live, right? And I know you're not going to miss an episode now. You're going to be watching live and you're going to come in and ask good questions.
How did I miss that? Exactly. The best one out there.
That is funny. All right, let's see some of these questions or comments that mostly Andrew highlighted.
I was just trying to highlight any of the questions. Did we get to all the questions? I've been trying to highlight questions that we were asked, but there's still a couple.
Okay, here's a good one. Here is a good one for Bill. What do you think is right with Christianity?
Community. That's the problem we have as atheists, is the community is terrible. We have this book club, the Atheist Book Club, and it's just so tedious. And we were reading Tarzan. What does that have to do with atheism? And these esoteric books, and it's all intellectuals. And my Lord, we just have problems. But Christianity has a lot going for it. It improves people's lives, apparently. Changes. I mean, that's one of the reasons I came to Christ, because I used to hear the testimonies of people that went from drugs to Christ and how it just totally transformed their life. So, and here's the thing. I play pickleball with Muslims, and the problem is they don't have workout clothes. They're just got all this clothes on, and it's just ridiculous. And they don't swim. Swimming is just a fantastic thing to do to get your toning, and just a fantastic exercise. And see, you can be a Christian, go to a hip church, and you really don't have to believe anything or go out of your way. Just go with the flow, have your little iPad on the sofa and be cool, But with, things like Islam, you got those 5 prayers, which is just at 6 a.m. people have visited Muslim countries say it wakes you up at 6 a.m. And not to mention, if you have to go actually pray, it's just a very tedious religion. That
in fact, just to throw this as a side note, even in Israel, when I was in Israel in February, you were woken at 6 a.m. by the Muslims, which, just for the record, was legal and allowed in Israel, because Judaism would not be legal and allowed in Gaza. So just remember that when people are saying that Israel wants to wipe out all the Arabs or the Muslims or all of Gaza, and
in that book, remember the book Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus?
Yeah.
It's Jesus had his problems. I mean, where someone goes, "Hey, can I bury my dead?" And he said, "Hey, look, we got things to do. We got a goal here. The kingdom's coming." So yeah, he is. But Muhammad with raiding caravans, and I listened to a debate from a Muslim about his wife Alicia, and it was like, oh, she wasn't 12, she was like 16 or 17. It's a 50-year-old man with a 17. So she was 17. It's still weird. And they go, oh, that's the culture of the time. Well, guess what? If you're a prophet of God, and you guys tell me, don't you think you should transcend culture?
Well, I would argue that the argument is more of that of Mormonism. Where Mormonism, it's like, oh well, we could just change this to fit the prophet. But yeah, the Prophet Muhammad, more serious is that he said there are only 4 wives, and then when he wanted a 5th wife, his adopted son's wife, all of a sudden God changes his mind. So let me do this, Drew. I know you got some questions there, but I know Chuck was backstage for the whole show. And I know he's first time in. I want to bring him in if that's okay with you, just see if he had any questions. And so we'll welcome Chuck. Let me remove the banner so folks could see Chuck's Twitter handle, because I was cracking up at that. His Twitter is Atheist Nightmares.
Yep.
So go find him on Twitter there, I guess. I'll have to go look you up there. So,
okay.
Welcome. Any questions you have for us or comments?
I've got some questions for Bill, if that's okay. And I certainly appreciate him coming on and being forthright and all that. I've been writing down some notes on the conversation, and most of the conversation seems to have revolved around the idea of contradictions or potential contradictions that would refute the Bible or refute Christianity in some way. Was that a correct summation, would you say?
He said yes, but he's muted.
Oh, okay.
You think I can read lips?
Okay. So
yes, the contradictions are seriously problematic.
Okay, I appreciate that. Okay, so let me ask you this: so you're appealing to the immaterial laws of logic, specifically the law of non-contradiction, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So are the laws of logic universally authoritative?
Probably.
Probably. And could you expand on that?
Just say yes. Okay, I'll say yes.
Yes. Okay. And my next question would be: by what ultimate authority do you declare that the laws of logic are universally authoritative?
I have no authority, and that's one of the problems. You're familiar with Alvin Plantinga's thing about how do we get our morals if it's by evolutionary argument against naturalism. You're familiar with that? That if we're just randomly evolved to survive, not necessarily to have good moral objective values, how in the world can you trust our morals or our reasoning in general? And it's a good point.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's what I'm getting to. The materialist worldview does result in logical absurdity, because every time that you say I, me, my, according to the materialist worldview, it's your brain chemicals forcing you to say that.
Yes.
And every time that you have a thought that I'm thinking this, I'm doing that, that's potentially one part of your brain fooling another part of your brain that itself actually exists.
And there's all sorts of problems with our memory, our cognitive abilities. We have biases. We have all sorts of problems. And I have these atheist biases that I'm exposed to. So there might be something out there that might change my mind that I'm not aware of. I go, oh my Lord, how did I ever think that? So I'm with you 100%. And like you said, existentially, we're just trying to eke out some meaning and blindly, just trying to figure it out.
Let me ask. Brain chemicals are trying to eke out a meaning.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. So let me just point this out. A couple things. One, there was a comment much earlier that when I was talking about chemicals, and it says Keith says it would be when I said that with transgenders, it says it would be their pre-programmed brain chemicals identifying as trans. So this is an example, and Bill, you and I talked a lot about this in debate, confirmation bias. In fact, you actually brought it up, and then I pointed out the rest of the debate. But that's the thing here is that what I see, and with the questions like Chuck's asking, is a confirmation bias, and you're admitting you have an atheist bias, and so.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So. Here's a question I'd have for you. Would you be able to say that you're truly open-minded if you have an atheist bias that rejects information that doesn't agree with an atheist point of view?
Probably not.
Okay. So, let me put this up. I saw this earlier. Here's Rob's comment. He said, Bill is honest. You got to give him that. That was the same comment that we saw last week in the debate. Mm-hmm. We were playing. Yeah. All right, Chuck, I'll hand it back to you if you want. It sounded like you had some more questions.
No, I think I'll leave the questions there, but I would like to make a statement for Bill just to think about. This is whenever I'm asked, why I say that the Christianity is true and the Bible is true, and I like to put it this way: is that the biblical worldview is the only worldview that is internally consistent. And it is also consistent with the reality in which we find ourselves. And that any worldview or religion not based on the authoritative word of God, consisting only of the Old and New Testament scriptures, results in logical absurdity and or evil.
Well, and let me say that Mormonism, for instance, there's no chance that that could be true because you have DNA evidence that the Jews never were in Central America. I mean, this convicts killers, okay? You don't have that sort of falsifiable thing in Christianity. Joseph Smith had like 38 wives. He was just a horrible person. Even his own followers said the nanny affair, where he had sex with his nanny, is like, he goes, it's a sordid, terrible affair. He'd send missionaries out so he could be with his wives. Why would God choose such a horrible person to be the leader of it? Christianity, Jesus isn't like that. Jesus doesn't seem to have those problems. And there's evidence, like I was talking to Aaron Ra, the great atheist leader of our community, that
Atheist. I mean, he's a Satanist now.
well, whatever. The thing is, he said, oh, that's all folklore. No, Christianity, the skeptics, James and Paul, come to Christ and evidence. The 500 that witnessed Jesus, some of whom are still alive, that's an evidence. Might not be, like I was talking to Tim McGrew and saying, he goes, it's sufficient evidence. And he goes, what do you want, Bill? Do you want I do want to depose those people. I do want to say, where did you see Jesus? What was he wearing? I do want a better testimony, better evidence.
That's a
Well, let me just first off, before you go to that, let me thank Chuck, and because I'm going to put him backstage. So Chuck, your Twitter handle again. Let me remove
Good questions.
People can see it. Is Atheist Nightmares?
Yeah, and I just followed him, by the way.
Yeah, I'm going to go. I'll do that.
That's a great name, Chuck, by the way. I love your name
Okay.
of your podcast.
Thank you. Well, the real fireworks really happens in the comments and replies, so you'll have to dig into those.
Well, hey, you're welcome to come back anytime you want, Chuck. It was good to meet you.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
All right. So, Drew, go ahead. Because there's a couple more of the questions that we had from the students. I know I wanted to get to some. I was just curious of Bill's. Some that would be quick too, but you were going to ask some.
Well, what Chuck was just, not Chuck, but Bill was just touching on with, we need better evidence. This is a question I was saving and really towards the end, but I think the fact that he said that is a good time to bring it up. Is that is there any amount of evidence, or we can say what evidence would be good enough to cause you to believe Christ is true and Christianity is true? Christ is Lord. And
obviously, hostile witnesses would be good if we had hostile witnesses testify to the empty tomb. The minimal facts, Gary Habermas's things, some of those are compelling, and I would agree with some of them. But you also have problems like the Gospel of Peter, which was widely read in the Mediterranean and by the Christian communities, which has Jesus going to the sky and then a talking cross behind him. And that's our only account of Jesus actually coming forth from the tomb. So there just seems to be problems. Like I said, Dale Allison, who's like a Christian, sees their problems. But see, you can be a Christian and embrace these difficulties and contradictions and so forth. And, that's okay. It's just... you have some really smart people, like I said, like David Fitzgerald, who's a smart guy who believes Jesus never existed. That's how bad the evidence is for these people. So I love some of the evidence, like in Galatians 1:18, where it says, hey, Paul says, I went and met James, the brother of Jesus, and Peter's closest disciple. Man, and it's off the cuff. There doesn't seem to be an agenda. So that seems to put Jesus pretty solid in history. And even though Paul doesn't know a lot about Jesus' miracles, his parables, and so forth, he does know about the Last Supper, the 12 disciples. He knows some things, okay? But I'd like him to know more. And I know the letters weren't addressing these issues, but do you see what I'm saying? Can you feel me? What I'm saying about I'd like a little bit better evidence.
Yeah. So you mentioned hostile witnesses. Would the Jewish leadership be hostile to Jesus?
Of course. Yeah.
Okay. And yet they pay the Roman soldiers to say they stole the body, which means that they knew the body was missing and it wasn't the wrong tomb. It wasn't stolen. What about demons? Would they be hostile? to Jesus,
Sure.
and yet they use terms of deity for him, claiming he's God, claiming that he's an authority over them. I mean, so you're saying hostile witnesses, and we have them. You may not like them.
Well, you know, as John Dominic Crossan said, the people that knew didn't care. You know, like let's say the grave robbers who knew they'd stolen the body, or the Romans or whatever. And the people that cared, the disciples, didn't know where the Bible was. So, you know, you got difficulties.
Yeah, easily explained. So,
because hold on, Andrew, because we're talking about hostile witnesses, right? We also have to take into account the guards that were standing outside of the tomb, and you know, we see this in Matthew 28. The guards that were standing there, the tomb that was open, they trembled in fear. They ran back to give a report, and they said that he's risen, it's empty, and they told him not to say anything.
Well, see,
that would be legendary embellishment.
Yeah, I would say that they weren't. We don't know if they were hostile, right? But the one, but you might have a better argument with those that put Christ to death, right? Who is centurion who's there, and then
we have no king but Christ.
Yeah.
Well, he says surely that was the Son of God. Yeah. So obviously the gospel writer could have just put that in. We don't have videotape. We'd love to have videotape of this, and then I'll be convinced. Sure, I was convinced at 17.
You're convinced of so many things that you take. Like seriously, Bill, if you took a step back and watch the debate, watch this, and look at how many things you assume to be true and you don't question, right? And yet you don't have eyewitness testimony for the things that are, so much of your argument is based on the ordering of Mark being written first, or maybe from
Mark priority, and Q,
that there's supposedly different writers and not just Moses from the first 5 books. All of that conjecture that you hold to that without questioning it, or at least it seems that you're not questioning it, and you hold to that, and yet you don't have eyewitness testimony of that either. So there's, and I'm saying this lovingly to you, Bill, because I think you know that I appreciate you and I love you, but it's an inconsistency that you have with what you're holding to, and and I think I know you're not going to take this. You're not going to be offended by this. I think you're going to know my heart when I say this, but it's a hatred that you have for God that causes you to not want to believe, because you know that I'm going to hold to the fact that everyone knows God exists, that God exists. It's just people suppress that truth and unrighteousness, and we all start off hating God, and so it's that hatred we have for the true God who really exists, not the one that we make up in our mind, that we end up rebelling against him. And I just plead with you.
Well, in Romans, this is what gets me, God, and we're so on the same page, Andrew, with these prosperity people, with God's my friend and 99.9. It says... I was going to
tell Drew not to get you started with that, because Drew and you will definitely be on the same page with Bethel, for sure.
Well, it's like, how clear could it be? Romans, doesn't it say we're enemies of God? Mm-hmm. Okay, so you're absolutely right. Yeah, if you're an enemy, you're not you don't have a loving relationship. It makes sense. You would be enemies, hating God. So I see your point. So
my plea to you, Bill, is, and I made this before. I made it dinner before the debate. At the debate, I'll plead with you again. There was one of the comments I saw. I think I started. Let me see if I can find it real quick. But someone was saying that it's like you're sound like you're. Oh, here is Rob. He said, "I think Bill is on the cusp of coming back, quote unquote, coming back to Christianity. He has a lot of I don't knows and fascinated with Christianity." My plea to you, Bill, is you're a smart guy. You're a knowledgeable guy. You're not one of these guys who's just being blinded and saying, well, I'm not going to look. I'm going to look only at things you're looking at both sides. You're looking at things where Christianity and saying, look, this is right. And even people that hold the same position I do are wrong with this. You're able to do that. But apart from all that, you're looking for evidence when you have a spiritual problem. You don't have an evidence problem, Bill. You have a spiritual problem. And so my plea with you is you'd repent, that you'd recognize that, you know what, all the evidence in the world, it doesn't matter, because the problem you have is not an evidential one.
Well, and I can sympathize with that. And sometimes there's a guy in our book club, Ken Daniels, who was a former missionary to Africa. And they said, do you want to go to the, and oh, put me to the hottest park. So he actually read Robert Price and these other atheists, and they said, wow, I want you to read Christian books for the next 4 months. But the thing is, he and I think a lot alike, and here he's a really more of a thinker, but he analyzes everything to death. You know those type people, right? So he's very analytical, very smart. And I've asked him, I said, Ken, do you think you might have overthought this thing? And I might have the same problem. I might be because I remember as a Christian having that peace that transcends all understanding, and feeling that presence of God. And sometimes I ask myself, Andrew, how in the world did I get here? I really don't know, to be honest with you.
Yeah. So a couple of questions the students had that I'm just curious of, and just quick answers. One was, do you believe in theistic evolution?
Again, I have real problems with it because there's evidence on both sides. Like you said, Stephen Meyer says the information in the Cambrian to have these new body plans like arthropods and so forth. How do you get these morphological changes? I just don't get it. And I know Richard Dawkins says it's like a movie theater reel where you have slight changes that add up to big changes. Okay, I can get that. I know I'm just seeing it from this small little point in time, that if I could view it over the millions of years, it might be, oh, I see it, I got it, yeah. But again, I just see so many problems that, I'm willing to be convinced either way.
Well, one last question I have from the students was that I'd like to get your answers. One of the students asked you, what do you think happens after you die? Is there an afterlife?
Well, it's scary because, it's like to think this is all you got and you just want to live, as meaningful a life as you can and do as much good as you can. So it's tough. And it's very reassuring if you're a Christian and you do have, that belief that, everything's going to turn out, good at the end. But it does lead to a little complacency where instead of trying to do things yourself, you go, I'll just wait for, kind of run out the clock till, Jesus comes or, whatever.
So let me see if I could, Drew, I'm just going to try and go through some of the comments that we have starred here. We see if we can get through this. And
I got a question for the end, and
okay,
it's just a fun question for Bill.
All right. So this was an early question or statement toward you, there, Drew. No shave November in full effect.
This is 1 month of beautiful beard right here.
Yeah. Rob had said, so Bill probably watched J. Warner Wallace and/or Frank Turk. You already mentioned Frank.
But yes, I've watched Jay. Someone actually just was telling me about Jay Warner today, and we've had him on the book club. Sure.
Okay, so D asked the question for Bill: is it possible that you weren't a true Christian to begin with?
Oh man, is that a great question?
I think you know my position on this.
Yes. Well, in my friend Eric Hoven, who we both know, says he that wasn't among us or left us isn't among us. And you have again, you have to live with the tension. In Romans, it seems to say, hey, if he's saved us, how in the world he's for us? Who can be against us? How can he lose you? And Jesus says, those who come to me, I'll no way lose. But then again, in Hebrews, you go, whoa, if you forsake Jesus and his resurrection and his sacrifice, what's left for to make atonement? So wow, I mean, and here's what I always say is, like, I didn't really do much. I didn't have a big testimony like you, Andrew. I didn't going from a Jewish background. I was just a stupid regular Christian, okay? But Ken Daniels, now when you're a missionary to Africa, you're pretty much all in. You're pretty committed. So, and he he's never kissed anybody but his wife. So it's not a morality thing. With him, he just looked at the evidence and he told me he got tired of putting a square peg into a round hole. So was I a Christian? Who knows?
All right. So there's more comment to you. Isaac says, when you were talking about the cleanliness of the woman, he says Leviticus 15 also includes language of men's uncleanness as well. So just to point that out.
Yeah, Jews had a real thing with purity and that stuff, didn't they, Andrew?
Well, actually, and I'll encourage you to go. There's a couple of videos out there of this. If you search for Leviticus Andrew Rappaport, you will see at least 2 or 3 times where I've taught through the entire book of Leviticus in 1 hour. I do it in Sunday school.
Oh yeah, that's
and
right.
Okay, you win. you spent more time than this than I have. If you've gone through the book of Leviticus, good for you. You are great.
I'll encourage you to go watch it because
I'd love to.
What you'll see is all that cleanliness and uncleanliness. It's people get lost in the detail and don't step back to see the main picture, which is the gospel. And that's really what Leviticus shows is we're not clean. We're not pure. We need to be redeemed and we can't do it. We need atonement from God. Only God can provide that. And Leviticus, as you realize with the Jewish way of thinking, it's not like a Western way of thinking where you build a point upon point upon point and your climax is at the end. No, in a Jewish way of thinking is more Eastern. So your climax is in the middle. So it's kind of like, Moses is working up a mountain and now he comes down. Well, what's the climax? The Day of Atonement. Okay. Leviticus 17. And so so the first 16 chapters are working up to the Day of Atonement. Then you hit that and you're coming down. And on the other side, it's all about God being God. So
that's funny.
By the way, let me just interject real quick that when I say that Moses wasn't historical, Abraham, it doesn't get historical to David. And certainly we have things like Hezekiah's tunnel and stuff and, in the prophets, like certainly they were historical. I'm just going by what the consensus says. And as Dale Allison says, he hates consensus. So the consensus could change. I'm very aware of that. I'm just telling you what the consensus is. And
has the consensus ever been wrong?
Yes, of course. Yeah. I mean,
20, you have to admit that.
Yeah. But one of the questions was why are you telling us this? What do you hope? Do you want to convert us, the kids? And it's like, as atheists, we're not commanded like you guys to go and preach the gospel. We're not commanded anything. So what we're doing is trying to go and educate and get these kids to see what New Testament scholarship says. For instance, that Paul's letters, 7 of them, Romans, Corinthians, Galatians, these are authentic. But things like the pastorals, like Timothy and Titus, these were written 50 years later when they had a church structure. They weren't written by Paul. So whether you believe it or not, what I'm trying to preach is learn these things that scholarship says. Learn what the consensus is. And you don't have to agree with it, but at least be aware of it. So when you go to school, you won't be blindsided. I think you would agree with that, wouldn't you, Andrew? And Drew?
Well, like I said to the students, I mean, the fact is we have to look at the scholarship and remember that they have a confirmation bias as well.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, especially, just in the scientific realm, right? There's experts that would hold to radiometric dating, but yet radiometric dating has been proven to be wrong against rocks of known age, but yet it's assumed to be right of rocks of unknown age. So
yeah,
you got to be careful with that. But in talking, Bill mentioned, talking about Leviticus and cleanliness, and he said, they had a real thing with purity. The sad thing is many Christians, professing Christians today, don't have a thing about purity. It's almost like it's the cool thing to be an impure Christian, and not seek holiness.
Are you picking on Doug Wilson again? No. So Drew, go for you had something, and after whatever question you have, I want to give an appeal to Bill.
Well, it's interesting.
You expect.
I've dated Mormon girls, and Mormons are extremely moral. With this hip, cool church, the Christians just go there and then just go do the big show, and then they just live like non-Christians, you know? So it's just, and there's no accountability like there used to be. You can just go and be a cool Christian, sing those Hillsong and Bethel songs, and, you know, it's sad what Christians become.
Yeah, it's because no one likes church discipline anymore. But so Bill, I had a question for you along the lines of your book club. What would you say is the best Christian book you have read, and what is the worst atheist book you have read?
Stephen Meyer for the Christian book. I love his Return of the God Hypothesis. He gives excellent evidence. As I've even read, you know, with so much time on my hand, his book on the cell or whatever. So the atheist book, Lawrence Krauss's thing, and he's going to be on, but you know that universe, this quantum fluctuation leading to, you know, 100 billion galaxies with 100 billion stars. I mean, it just boggles the imagination how that happens. And there was another guy, and I asked him, how does this, and he goes, that's the way, you know, things work. And I go, well, am I just supposed to have faith in this deal? You know, I'd like evidence. And he said, that's the way exponentials work. And I'm like, okay, is that it? So, yeah.
Okay. I'll turn it over to you, Andrew.
So, yeah, I mean, you know, Bill, you know where I'm going to go. I'm just going to plead for you to come to repentance. I mean, man, I you know, after we had the debate, I got to the airport. I got a call from our friend Eric Hoven, and even he was like, you know, what is it that holds Bill that we both know? But
I love Eric, and we were at the ICR at the planetarium, and it's just like he's looking at me like, do you see it? And it's like, Eric, there's other things, my man.
Well, and that's the thing. There are other things that hold you back, and I'm not sure what it is, but you know, like even with Eric, you know, it was the same thing. He was saying, like, you know, you're such an honest individual who you're not the typical atheist who just is trying to disprove Christianity rather than try to prove something. You're trying to evaluate things, but you're like this puzzle. I understand why Eric is like frustrated with it, because you're so honest. Like one of the comments that someone made, I don't remember if it was here or with the students, but that was like, you're arguing so much for Christianity.
His device isn't connected.
Yeah, he probably hit the wrong button. We got to wait for him to come back. Well, while he admitted he wasn't great with the technology. He had his girlfriend setting it up. Okay, you're back, Bill. You're not on camera yet, but that's okay.
Stop touching things.
Sorry, guys.
All right. Yeah,
sorry.
Stop touching things.
Go ahead, Andrew.
You can't be trusted at the keyboard. You'll have to tell her that I said that. So, here's the thing, Bill. Look, I love you. I so want to see you come to repentance. I so want to see you. You love to study these things. You have such a passion. You understand Christianity very, very well. And yet you're so influenced by the scholars who are looking to disprove biblical Christianity. You know that not everyone who says they're a Christian is a Christian. And so many of those that are in the scholarly realm, they're denying the biblical Jesus. And so I plead with you that you and I both know that we're guilty before God. We would deserve eternity in a lake of fire, but God made a way of escape. And I plead with you to come to Christ.
Oh, thanks.
So I want to thank you for coming on, Bill.
Appreciate it.
It was a lot of fun. It was fun doing a debate with you as well. I really appreciated that. Appreciated dinner with you. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to continue praying for you. You are welcome to come in if you want to come in and ask more questions. And you know, it's an open show, so anyone can come in. We'd love to have you back. And you know, when I get back out to Dallas, I'll be.
Please. Yeah. Great. Enjoyed it.
All right. So with that, next week, and I'm just going to mute Bill so we don't get that feedback. So next week, I'm not sure what we're going to do. We may have and Drew, you'll find this one interesting, but somebody tagged me on Facebook because there was some guy, Tim, I don't remember his last name, who's basically implying, and I don't think I got it right, but I think he was implying that Calvinism is like dangerous and false. And someone tagged me and said, "Why don't you go on Andrew's Apologetics live show and debate it with him?" And so he said, "Sure." I said, "Okay." I said, "You can always come in, but I said, if you want to spend more time, contact me and we'll give you more time in the show." And so he did. So I emailed him. I'm just waiting for him to give me some dates of which dates in December he could come on. And so that may be next week. If not, we'll do a Q&A. December does get busy, family time and things like that. So I don't plan on having a show on the 21st or the 28th. I know for sure the 28th I won't have a show because I will be in New York City with my son and his girlfriend. And so, because I got to get him to a flight that night. And so I know for sure that one, but my daughter will be in on the 21st. So we won't have a show, but the 7th and 14th we'll have something. If not this Calvinism, we'll do an open Q&A. All right. And so until next week, just remember to strive to make today an eternal day for the glory of God. And we will see you next time. Keep praying for Bill.